My God, what I wouldn't have done to have this lens series when we were shooting a documentary in Alaska on the Fujifilm Eterna 55. But it's too late for that now. But that said, we've just received the new 19 to 35 millimeter t3.5, a sister lens to the 32 to 90 millimeter t3.5 that Chris is actually filming me on right now. These are real cinema lenses that would have made my life so much easier, and they have some really exciting new features and some odd quirks. I'm Jordan Drake, this is PetaPixel, and let's talk about these unadaptable, auto-focusing, weather-sealed, image stabilized cinema lenses? Now I know what you're all thinking. If I get myself a cinema camera with a giant medium format sensor and the lenses that'll cover it, well, it's gonna be so beautiful, it doesn't matter what kind of music I use, right? Wrong. If you use bad music, your video will still be boring. And that's why you should trust our friends at Audio. You see, Audio has an expansive library of rights-free music created by actual human beings who are compensated for their effort. And you can typically get lifetime access to this entire musical library for $500, which is a pretty good value, but I can do way better for you. If you use coupon code PetaPixel199, you can get lifetime access for $199, $300 off. It's a smoking deal you should definitely take advantage of to get excellent rights-free music for an entire lifetime. Thank you so much to Audio for sponsoring this episode. So we typically don't review cinema lenses, but I really wanted to make an exception for these because they do stuff no other lens does. And the most important thing is the mount on these. These are GF mount. So that means they're effectively unadaptable to other camera systems. These are really gonna work only on the GFX hybrid mirrorless bodies or the Fujifilm Eterna 55. Now I should mention I was supposed to have an Eterna 55 for running some of these tests on, but it didn't arrive in time. So we're using a GFX 102, which is actually maybe a better camera for lens tests because we can also shoot high resolution stills and see how this might perform in the future when we get high res open gate recording on future GFX camera models. But the other thing to remember is this sensor is extremely tall, much taller than what we typically see on other cinema cameras. So as a result, if you're planning on adapting a lot of the cinema lenses that are currently available on the market, they're not going to cover that full sensor. These lenses will. The other thing that's really interesting about it is, much like the recent Sigma AF zooms that we've seen, these are capable of autofocus, but still have a properly geared manual focus ring on them. We're going to talk about the performance of these a little bit later, but it really opens up the flexibility for using these in run and gun autofocus situations as well as controlled manual focus situations. Now the design of these lenses is largely conventional for cinema zoom lenses. We've got a big front element there with a 111 millimeter filter diameter, so you're going to want to look at a matte box with a very wide mounting ring when using this. Going back a little bit further, we've got a mounting point. It's a 3/8 screw there if you want to support the lens directly on your rig. Behind that, we've got a manual focus ring, and this is indexed in both meters and feet. If you're in manual focus, this is engaged. If you're in autofocus, it doesn't do anything. Behind that, we've got the manual zoom ring. This is also indexed with your millimeter focal length, but what's cool is this is a servo zoom. We're going to talk about that functionality a little later. Going back even further, look at that, we got the iris there. So we can see that this is a maximum aperture of t3.5. We can cycle that, it is stepless, but also you can set it so it's locked and the camera will operate it, as well as put it in a full auto aperture mode. A little further back, we've got our stabilization on and off toggle. This is really important because the Eterna 55 is not a stabilized camera, unlike a lot of the more modern GFX bodies. We've got a zoom rocker, and depending on how hard you push it, that will adjust the zoom speed on that. Below that, we've got our zoom settings, either manual or servo, focus, manual or servo, and a lock for the iris. All the way at the back, you can see that giant GF lens mount on there, but also check out these gaskets. This sucker's weather sealed, so you can shoot if you were, say, doing a fishing documentary in Alaska. Again, this would have been really awesome. Now, there have been lots of autofocus cinema lenses with a manual focus ring. The problem is the manual focus ring pretty much always feels like on those things. So with this, much like the recent Sigma Cine AF lenses, you feel very connected. It's still just driving a motor to move the lens elements, but it's doing it so fast, it feels like you're using a mechanically coupled lens. In fact, I was asking Chris what the lens feels like. I was like, do you like the focus by wire? And he's like, this thing's focused by wire? I had no idea, because it feels like a true manual focus ring. That means you can pull focus without worrying about overshooting with it. And if you're on set, you'll be able to set markers with a focus puller and hit them consistently. But if you're gonna pack all of these features and such massive coverage into a lens, well, you're gonna pay for it in terms of size. These are big suckers, and they're heavy suckers as well, and both of them are just over a noct. We're looking at 2,115 grams for the 32 to 90 and 2,100 grams for the 19 to 35. Now the great thing, that weight is so similar. If you throw these on a gimbal or a rig, they're still going to balance even when you're switching lenses around. But walking around with these lenses today, yeah, they're big, they're heavy, and they're annoying. So I've talked about how I find the manual performance of both the focus and the zoom ring to be excellent, but there is kind of a weird disconnect, which is if you set either of these to servo functionality, well, you can still see them being indexed on the lens here, but those numbers are going to be wrong. So you'll actually have to check on the camera what focal length you're at and double check your focus. It's not a huge issue, but it's something a lot of the time where I've looked at the lens and been like, oh, it's set to macro focus, I got to change that. But no, it's actually focused the correct distance away. It can just be a little bit jarring. All right, so now let's talk about some of the testing that we've done for the image quality on these lenses. And I want to mention that I'm using this brand new Glyph CF Express Type B card for the first time on this. And the reason I'm using that is if I'm shooting high resolution video, this thing has a sustained write speed of 3,000 megabytes per second. So I know it's going to be able to handle any frame rate that I throw at it. So, okay, let's take a look at these tests here, starting with breathing. Now, breathing is a phenomenon where as you focus the lens from minimum focus to infinity, you'll actually see the field of view change. And when you're filmmaking, this can be really distracting, kind of draw attention to the focus pull. So looking at these two lenses here, starting with the 19 to 35, here you can see we do get a little bit of movement, just a very small amount right at the edges of the frame. But again, this is not something that's going to distract your audience. It's a very minor effect. But now looking at the 32 to 90 millimeter, we are seeing almost no breathing at all on this lens. It's just an excellent performance. So you're going to be buying these lenses to shoot cinema, and if you're pulling focus, no distraction there. This is a great performance. Now, another thing that can be very problematic is LoCA. If you're getting lateral chromatic aberration, you can often fix that in post. But LoCA, where you see a color shift between the foreground and background out of focus areas, can be really distracting, as we saw earlier this year with the Sigma Izu primes. And thankfully, we're really seeing no LoCA on these lenses. It's an excellent performance. Another thing I really wanted to test is flare. And a lot of the time when we're looking at cinema lenses, they actually let them flare a little more. It can look really cool in motion, but Fujifilm has said these are really optimized to minimize flare. So we've got Chris in front of this light source here, and you can see on the 19 to 35, we do get a little bit of flare, definitely a loss in contrast right around him, and just a tiny little bit of ghosting, but it does actually look pretty cool. Jumping over to the 32 to 90, we get a little bit more ghosting here when we've got that bright light source behind, and we do still see a loss of contrast. So these aren't completely clean lenses if you're shooting towards a bright light source, but I actually prefer the look that we get to a clean one here. It looks really nice. So while these lenses are T3.5, which might sound pretty dark, remember they're still giving you the same depth of field as an f2.8 lens in full frame. So you're going to have fairly shallow depth of field a lot of the time. And how do those out of focus areas look? Well, the bokeh on these lenses is just truly lovely. You can see the background just falls off very organically without kind of a distracting harshness to it. So if you want to shoot some close-up shots like we're doing right now with actually a fair amount of foreground and background detail, it's just not distracting. It just looks very pleasant. Bokeh on these lenses is awesome. Something we have to address when we're talking about cinema zoom lenses is whether or not they're parfocal. And what that means is, does the focus shift as you zoom the lens? It can be a real issue if you want to zoom during a shot. And these lenses are really complicated that way. I think that what they're doing is actually electronically correcting the focus as the zoom shifts. But what that means is, yes, at the start and end of your shots, as you can see here, they're going to be in focus. However, when I was analyzing the footage, what I find is consistently as the zoom is moving, the image falls out of focus. So that means, yes, you can absolutely reframe your shot between takes, but if you plan to zoom while the camera is rolling and use the footage, you're going to find large sections of that zoom are out of focus. And this really hampers the usefulness of that servo zoom. All right, let's talk about the sharpness on these lenses. And I know this might be controversial, but I think it was best to test these using the photo mode of the GFX 102. And my thinking behind this is that yes, we do have the Eterna 55, which can record 8K in its central region or 4K open gate, but they're not really testing these sensors to their maximum in terms of detail. So if we test this in photo mode, we can see in the future, if we see 8K cameras recording open gate, will these lenses still perform? So let's start with the 19 to 35 at 19 millimeters. Looking at the center here, you can see there's a little bit of softness when we really magnify here, but this thing gets incredibly sharp when you stop it down to f8. So at 19 mils, let's look at how the corners look in the 4:3 aspect ratio you'll see with open gate, and there we do get some softness in the corners, but when you stop it down, they get very, very good. I also wanted to check how those corners are going to look in a 16:9 aspect ratio, since I think that's largely how this camera is going to be used. And you can see there we do get better results than the open gate, but still a little bit of softness. You'll still want to stop it down for the best results. Now let's zoom this lens in just a little bit into 35 millimeters, and you're going to find, yeah, it's basically the same story. In the center here, just a tiny bit of softness, but it's basically perfect when we stop this lens down. Looking at the corners in the 4:3 open gate recording here, you can see fair amount of softness when we're wide open. Stopping things down though, they look very good, and just slightly better results if we use the 16:9 region of this. So now let's jump over to the 32 to 90 millimeter lens. And looking at the center at 32 millimeters, we're getting excellent performance, even wide open. Stopping down, you just see a bit of a bump to contrast. Looking at the corners though, still that softness lingers when we're in an open gate recording here. You do still want to stop this lens down for the best results. And jumping down to the 16:9 area, it's a little better than what we saw with the previous lens, but you want as much sharpness as possible, stop it down. Zooming into 90 millimeters, here we do get a little bit softer results right in the center, wide open, but stop it down. Hey, it's really, really good. Let's move things over to the corners, and yeah, there's definitely some softness there unless you stop the lens down. And looking at the 16:9 region, again, just a little bit soft until we stop this down. So what this means to me is if we're recording in 4K or even 8K, you can shoot these lenses wide open and have no problems. But in the future, if we see extremely high resolution sensors and you want to get the best out of these lenses for things like detailed wides, you're going to want to stop the lens down a little bit for tack sharp results. One other thing that's worth mentioning is if you're using the highest resolution record mode on the GFX 102 or the Eterna 55, it's just using the central region of the sensor for its 8K recording right now, where these lenses are excellent throughout the entire range. All right, I think we got to put it in the history books. 2026 was the year where they finally figured out autofocusing cinema lenses, because this thing has just been an absolute pleasure to use. I know Chris just keeps commenting like, man, I love this lens. I love the look of this lens. I love the handling of this lens. What a great lens. The biggest drawback to it is because of the mount, it's not going to be used by that many people. I mean, certainly the Fujifilm Eterna is out there, but I don't think it's that commonly used cinema body yet. And a lot of people looking at GFX bodies, well, they're probably not looking at big, bulky cinema lenses like this. But I think the important thing about these lenses is they're a major statement of intent from Fujifilm. There's no way that they would go out of their way to create two new lenses with cutting-edge technology that we haven't seen before if they weren't taking their new cinema camera project very, very seriously. I definitely don't think the Eterna 55 is a one-off from Fujifilm, and yes, these lenses are expensive, but if you look at them compared to other cinema zoom lenses, these are very affordable, especially when you consider the massive sensors that they can potentially cover. So I am hugely impressed with these lenses, and I'm looking forward to maybe seeing a telephoto version that would give us a Cine Zoom Holy Trinity available for the GF mount, but it makes the Eterna 55 a much more compelling camera right now, and I can't compliment Fujifilm enough for the cool technology that they've put to work in these lenses. But am I dumb? It's a very distinct possibility, so let me know in the comments below if you disagree with any of my takes on these lenses or any other thing about Fujifilm's Eterna project that you find really interesting. And we're going to be talking about these lenses on the PetaPixel podcast. You can watch it right here on the same YouTube channel or listen to it using any of your favorite podcasting apps. And if you thought this video was good, well, the best way to support Chris, me, and the entire PetaPixel team is with a PetaPixel membership. For only $3 a month or $30 a year, you not only can view the website ads free, but you get perk upon perk, including our latest one, 20% off an annual subscription to Capture One. It's a great way to support this show. But thank you so much for watching. I already said that, and I did the same thing last week too. I'm so mad at myself. I'll see you all soon with another episode of PetaPixel.